of the boy, almost 9 weeks after he disappeared from a remote sheep station near Yunta, around 300 kilometres north of Adelaide. Josh Webster has the details. Josh, 6 old mine shafts were searched and cleared.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tiff. These shafts were located on the property where Gus went missing in September, between 5 to 12 kilometres from the family's homestead. Police identified several locations after analysis of aerial mapping from previous searches. Some shafts were relatively shallow, but others were up to 20 metres deep, where specialised equipment was required to complete the searches. There was hope of a discovery today, with police leaving no stone unturned in the search, exploring if little Gus had fallen down one of the shafts. But for the family, it was another heartbreaking day with no evidence of the 4-year-old found. Star Group and Task Force Horizon officers were also on foot today, combing over more unsearched areas again, failing to locate any trace of Gus.
In the vast silence of the South Australian outback, across the rugged land stretching between Oak Park Station and the isolated region near Yunta, the disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont has become one of the most challenging mysteries faced by South Australia police in recent years. For weeks, highly trained search teams, investigators, digital mapping analysts, and specialists combed the property, yet the land continued to offer no answers. Every grid search, every drone pass, and every reevaluation of the timeline gaps seemed to bring the investigation back to the same unsettling question: how could a child vanish without a single trace? But now, new evidence has surfaced. Evidence that is changing the entire direction of the case. Detailed mapping has revealed previously unsearched mine shafts and underground structures on the Lamont family property. These areas were not included in the initial search radius due to dense terrain, structural risks, and aerial blind spots. This revelation triggered a full-scale, renewed operation as South Australia Police returned to Oak Park Station, this time with rope teams, shaft experts, and advanced imaging technology. Their mission: to determine whether these hidden mine shafts, some dangerously deep and concealed, could hold answers that were missed in the first phase. This update is not about sensational theories. It's about the critical investigative shift now shaping the direction of the case. It highlights how even the most extensive operation can overlook concealed areas, and why investigators are now retracing every step from the moment Gus Lamont was last seen. Today, we break down the new evidence: the search of the mine shafts, the digital mapping gaps, and the renewed investigative approach unfolding in the outback. With the focus shifting from surface searches to structural hazards, this may be the most important development since Gus disappeared. Before we jump into today's case, welcome to Detective Kate, true crime where every story matters and every clue counts. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to stay up to date on all our investigations. And don't forget, share your thoughts and theories below. Your insight could make a difference. The new phase of the investigation began when South Australia Police received updated digital mapping data highlighting blind spots in the original search around Oak Park Station. These blind spots weren't minor. They were pockets of terrain where dense scrub, collapsed soil, and deep shadows had prevented drones and aircraft from capturing clear images during the initial sweep. Inside these blind spots were multiple previously unsearched mine shafts, scattered across the Lamont family's vast property. Some of these shafts date back to early mining activity in the area, now partially concealed by vegetation or structural collapse. Their presence had not been fully documented in the early stages of the search. Recognizing the potential significance of these shafts, investigators acted quickly. Specialist vertical rescue teams, geological advisors, and confined space experts were deployed to the site. Their task was to carry out a controlled inspection of each shaft, many of which were extremely deep, unstable, and partially sealed by debris. These conditions meant that even an extensive ground search could have easily missed them. The decision to re-enter these zones wasn't driven by speculation, but by hard data. The updated mapping clearly showed gaps in the search grid, indicating that some areas were never visually confirmed, either by ground teams or air units. With this discovery, investigators had no choice but to treat these shafts as critical investigative points. This launched a full 2-day operation, during which teams lowered high-resolution cameras, scanned internal walls, and examined the base of each shaft. The goal wasn't only to look for physical items belonging to Gus Lamont, but also to rule out any scenario involving an accidental fall. a possibility that needed to be eliminated before the investigation could move forward. Although the results of this operation did not uncover any trace of Gus, the search confirmed one important thing. There were significant structural hazards on the property that had never been inspected, and the original search radius had meaningful gaps. This new evidence didn't solve the mystery, but it sharpened the investigative focus and forced a reevaluation of the earliest hours of the case. When South Australia Police and the Specialist Vertical Rescue Units returned to Oak Park Station, their primary objective was to fully inspect every previously unsearched mine shaft identified through the updated digital mapping analysis. These structures varied widely in depth, stability, and accessibility. Some were narrow vertical drops, while others had partially collapsed openings that made entry challenging and dangerous. To ensure precision and safety, the teams used a combination of rope operations, high-resolution shaft cameras, structural engineers, and geological advisors. Each shaft was treated as a potential scene requiring controlled entry. Cameras were lowered deep into the vertical chambers to capture footage of the interior walls, base material, and any possible disturbances. Structural experts assessed where debris had shifted naturally over time versus areas that could indicate recent interaction. Across this multi-day operation, multiple shafts were fully examined, some extending far below the surface. But despite the meticulous approach and the scale of the effort, investigators found no items belonging to Gus Lamont. There were no pieces of clothing, no toys, no personal objects, and no physical traces that could be connected to the missing child. Equally important were the findings related to the condition of the shafts themselves. In several of them, the sediment layers, dust patterns, and loose material appeared completely undisturbed. This indicated that nothing and no one had entered those spaces recently. In other shafts, natural erosion was visible, but again, there was no sign of a child's presence or movement. By the time the operation concluded, officials were able to confirm one critical point. None of the mine shafts examined contained evidence that Gus had been there. This outcome did not bring answers, but it did bring clarity. The shaft inspections effectively ruled out one of the more concerning possibilities and allowed investigators to redirect their focus to other parts of the property and other potential scenarios. The result strengthened the conclusion that if Gus did move away from the homestead area, it was unlikely he entered any of the shafts identified in this phase of the search. As days turned into weeks with no physical evidence linking back to 4-year-old Gus Lamont, investigators were forced to confront a difficult but necessary reality. The original assumptions guiding the early search may not have captured the full picture. Despite the massive deployment of resources across Oak Park Station, South Australia Police were still left without a single confirmed trace. Not clothing, not footprints, not personal items, nothing indicating where Gus had moved after he was last seen. This lack of findings compelled experts to reassess the core premise of the operation. Survival specialists emphasized that the South Australian Outback, especially the region stretching toward Yunta, is one of the most challenging terrains for a young child. The combination of heat, distance, rough ground, and sparse shelter makes survival extremely limited without immediate assistance. With this context, investigators began to question whether the initial search radius, based largely on assumptions about how far a child of Gus's age might travel, was sufficient. The focus then shifted to examining timelines, witness accounts, and property access points with renewed scrutiny. Detectives revisited the exact time Gus was last seen, the family's movements that morning, the grandmother's observations, and the sequence of activities across the homestead. They began checking for timeline inconsistencies, moments where movements overlapped, and any gaps that could indicate overlooked activity on the property. Equally important was the assessment of access points around Oak Park Station: gates, tracks, vehicle paths, and external roads. Investigators needed to determine whether anyone could have entered or exited the property unnoticed during the key time frame. This step wasn't driven by suspicion alone, but by procedure. In any unresolved search, all possibilities must remain open. As a result, the case gradually shifted from being treated strictly as a lost child scenario to a broader investigative category. This does not imply wrongdoing or accusation, but it means that multiple scenarios are now being considered equally: accidental wandering, environmental hazard, disorientation, external involvement, or an event outside the initially assumed radius. Search and rescue analysts reviewing the operation noted that the terrain around Oak Park Station remains one of the most challenging environments investigators have worked in. The combination of deep gullies, uneven ground, and old mining activity means critical areas can be easily masked from both aerial and ground perspective. Experts also highlighted that even with drones, heat distortion and shadowing around Yunta created pockets where visibility was severely limited, explaining how the mine shafts went undetected during the first phase. Former investigators observing the case have pointed out meaningful timeline gaps in the early hours after Gus Lamont was last seen. They've stressed that when no physical evidence is recovered, revisiting those early assumptions becomes essential. Their assessment supports the decision by South Australia Police to broaden the investigative lens and reevaluate movement patterns, access points, and witness accounts. The expert consensus is clear. The environment alone cannot explain the disappearance, and the lack of findings requires investigators to consider every possible scenario with equal weight. The renewed search and new findings have reignited public attention across South Australia. Community members and local media have followed the developments closely, expressing concern and hope for Gus Lamont's safe return. At the same time, authorities have warned about misinformation online. Fake images, AI-generated claims, and speculative posts have circulated, some suggesting sightings or clues that do not exist. South Australia Police have emphasized that only verified updates from official channels are credible, stressing the importance of relying on factual reporting during an ongoing investigation. The case continues to draw national focus, but investigators remain disciplined. Public reaction and online speculation will not dictate the direction of the search. Evidence and verified data do. After weeks of intensive searching across Oak Park Station and surrounding areas near Yunta, the investigation into the disappearance of Gus Lamont has reached a critical stage. While the inspection of mine shafts and previously unsearched areas did not produce physical evidence, the operation confirmed gaps in the original search radius and highlighted the need to reassess early timelines, witness accounts, and property access points. South Australia Police continue to analyze all collected data, reevaluate every lead, and coordinate with experts in survival, terrain mapping, and search operations. The investigation remains active and open, with multiple scenarios still under consideration, reflecting the complex challenges of searching such unforgiving terrain. For now, the case underscores the difficulty of locating a missing child in the remote outback, the importance of precise mapping, and the meticulous efforts of investigators, search teams, and specialists. Every step, every detail, and every verified piece of evidence is crucial, because even the smallest clue could bring answers for Gus Lamont and his family. The search continues, the investigation evolves, and authorities remain committed to uncovering the truth.